Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and you're all welcome to our webinar, our nitrates webinar here this afternoon, last day of January. So the webinar today is for Drystock and tillage farmers largely. It will be a dairying webinar tomorrow evening. So what we want to cover are, giving farmers an update on the new rules and regulations that are there and that concern all farmers and the Drystock and tillage in particular today. And so the speakers we have, and I'll introduce them in a few minutes, that we have our own speakers from the Kilkenny and the Waterford counties to cover both topics. So just by way of introduction, Terry Carr is my name. I'm a Drystock advisor here in Kilkenny. And I'm just going to go through a couple of introductory slides first. The one thing I will say to you at the very start is maybe two things. There is a Q&A function there on the bottom of your screen that if you have any questions, please enter your questions into that there. No one else will see the questions, only ourselves. And we'll ask the question then. We won't even mention your name or whatever. You don't have to put a name. We just ask the question there to our speaker. So it'll be totally anonymous. But we would encourage that. The most learning done from these webinars is where people enter questions on that Q&A function. And as I said, it's totally anonymous. And secondly, I just want to say to you that this webinar is being recorded. So for yourselves that are on it here live with us, you'll get a chance to hear and see it again, because we will be sending out a link next week on a text message to you. There'll be a link where you can re-listen to and re-look at the whole webinar again, and also to be up on the Chagas Kilkenny Waterford YouTube page for people to look at. So they're just the two things to bear in mind. So just before I introduce the speakers, just maybe, I suppose, why are we here, and why maybe are the department bringing in these new, probably tougher regulations for farmers? So look, it's all down to water quality effectively. And if you look at that graph there, there's a lot of figures on it. I'm not going to go through the figures other than to say, that on the top left, you see the year there, 2019 to 21, and down in the bottom, you're down to 1987 to 90. What we want to see is blue and green. They are high quality or good status rivers. We don't want to see the paler colors to the right. And if you look at that there, basically, go down to 1987 to 90 at the bottom. The blue and green were over to 60%, whereas now up, a good few years later, we're at about 54% there with our blue and green. So I suppose we need the blue and green bars to increase in size, head more to the right there. They're saying 54% of surface waters are at good to high status. 50% of rivers are at a good to high status. A lot of the lakes are in a good position. Only 36% of estuaries are at a good to high status. So that is the problem. And there's just a map then that the EPA have generated. And, again, we want the colors to be blue and green. And, if you look there at the map and look at where Kilkenny is, basically you see that the southeast, there's not a lot of blue in the southeast. And that's what's sort of coming home to roost there now, insofar as that the tougher regulations, while they're maybe impacting the whole country, there's certainly a talk of maybe even another band of regulations for the more intensive counties, which would be the southeast. So we're probably we're definitely not as much blue at all as you go anywhere up the country or towards the west. So we're into maybe poorer status waters there. So look, it's down to nitrogen and phosphorus. So what causes this nitrogen loss or diffuse nitrogen loss? Very quickly, most nitrogen losses from free drain and soil. So they're the more intensive, more commercial type farming counties over in the sort of the Kilkennys, Carlows, Wexfords, Waterfords, those counties. They're the ones there that are good intensive farming counties. They're the ones that probably where most nitrogen is used and where the better soils. Leaching occurs where more nitrogen applied than plant needs. Obviously, that's been addressed in new regulations. Excess nitrogen is leached by rain to waters. We even know that there's a later application there on chemical and an earlier closing period, and that will be covered in the presentations. I can just see there, you know, up at the medium nutrient storage up in the top of the soil and then leaching further down. And you see some other pathways there where this nitrogen can get leached away. And then phosphorus and sediment loss is often a lot of surface runoffs here. So heavy rainfall leads to overland flow of water, pea and soil sediment washed off into drains and streams. And again, just a diagram of the sort of pathways there. So obviously that surface water where the phosphorus maybe is in the clay or in organic manure supplied or whatever, and actual physically surface wash off into rivers. So that's, you know, obviously going to be causing pollution. So look, I'm going to stop sharing here now and we'll see our speakers. So we have Katrina Foley, Drystock advisor based in Dungarvan. Katrina's going to go first and cover normally the Drystock side of the house there and what way the new nitrates regulations affect beef sheep farmers. And then we have Mark Trimble. Mark's a tillage advisor up here in Kilkenny, and Mark is going to look at the effects from a tillage point of view. So as I reminding you again, the Q&A function is where we're going to learn most here over the next 35-40 minutes. You put in the questions, totally anonymous, and between myself and we have Martin Ryan here, another advisor in the Kilkenny office, we'll just read out the questions, ask the questions to the relevant speakers after the presentations, and that's where you'll gain most answers, and we'll know the sort of thinking out in the ground there from yourself as well. So at this stage, Katrina, I'm going to ask you to you present your slides, please, from the Drystock side of the house, and we'll take a couple of questions after yours.
So hi, my name is Katrina Foley and I'm a Drystock advisor here in the Dungarvan office. So what I'm going to be covering with you today is the nitrates regulation changes that have been coming in from 21 to 23. So starting back there in January 2021, new water protection measures came in for farms. Now the top three, excluding bovines from the watercourses and fencing off the watercourses, water troughs and crossing watercourses. Regulations came in to do with these for farms that are up at the higher end of the stocking rate. For farms that have a grassland stocking rate of over 170, for all derogation farmers, for farmers who are exporting slurry to bring themselves down under 170, or for farmers who are tillage farmers with a grassland stocking rate over 170. These first three things apply to them. So what they are is fencing off your watercourses from cattle and excluding them from drinking from the watercourses. You have to fence off 1.5 meters from the top of the bank. Water troughs, you have to ensure that they're 20 meters back from watercourses. This includes nose pumps as well. And also then for situations where you have animals crossing a watercourse daily, you need to think about putting a bridge up in that situation. If you are thinking about putting a bridge up, you do need to contact fisheries for permission. If you are in a situation where you are crossing a watercourse with animals, but it's not happening daily, you're possibly only crossing it a couple of times in the year, well then there is no need to bridge the watercourse, but you do have to put up a fence on each side of the watercourses to make sure that the animals can just go straight through the watercourse, that they can't go up and down it. What defines a watercourse then is, if you want to know is your stream one of these ones that these regulations apply to, if you go onto the OSI website, and it's the solid blue line under osi.ie on the 1 to 5,000 scale map. This last rule here then to do with farm roadways and surface water from farm roadways, this applies to every farm regardless of stocking rate. So this is an issue that affects all farmers. It's the prevention of direct runoff from farm roadways to waters. Now in this situation, water is defined as anything that can convey water. So you're talking about anything from a dry drain up to a river. It's applicable to dairy, dry stock and tillage farmers, irrespective of stocking rate. And in this situation, you need to slope the farm roadways away from the watercourse so that the fall is into the field side or ditch side and not in towards the water. You can also recommend it to put in ramps short distances apart. You keep them low and you keep them wide, and they are to try and divert runoff from the road into the watercourse. It doesn't let the water gather speed and doesn't let it travel over long areas. It also helps protect your own roadway from water running eroding the roadway. This legislation was effective from the 1st of January 21, and there's specs up on the department website for roadways if anyone wants to have a look. So some other issues that are affecting all farmers. So for round bale storage, where you have no effluent storage facilities, the max you can store your bales is 2 bales high, and they have to be 20 metres back from surface waters. Now remember, this is affecting all farmers. In a situation where you have wet bales, even bales stored at 2 bales high can leak. If your bales are wet and effluent will come out from a wet bale, that effluent must be gathered. So it would be advisable if when wet bales to store them only 1 bale high. And remember, even at 2 bales high, if you see effluent, that is supposed to be gathered. Also for round bale storage inside the farmyard, there's plenty of farmyards that are right beside drains and watercourses. You must remember that even in the farmyard, you have to have your round bales back 20 metres from surface waters. So there's also change to chemical nitrogen buffer zones. Previously, that was 2 metre. Spreading of fertiliser was 2 metres back from surface waters. That has now been up to 3 metres. Chemical fertiliser spreading, you can now start on the 27th of January and cease on the 14th of September. So we're after losing, I think, 2 weeks off that. And then for soiled water, there's a closed period now in 2023 for spreading of soiled water. You cannot spread from the 10th of December to the 31st. And that in 24 and 25, that's really becoming for the whole month of December. So there's no excuse anymore for any slurry tanker really to be on the road for the month of December. So what is soiled water? Generally, we think of soiled water to do with dairy farms, water from milking parlours, washdown and collecting yards. But there's plenty of situations where you have soiled water in a dry stock farm. So where you have unroofed temporary holding yards, where you might be washing beet or machinery, and where you have runoff from farmyards and silage bases, that can be all classed as soiled water. And you also need to remember that something that you think might be soiled water may not be. It might be slurry. So in this situation, if you have an unroofed feeding area and rainwater is touching that dung, that is classed as slurry and that needs 16 weeks storage. Also, seepage from manure pits is classed as slurry. Again, you have rainwater touching dung, and that is classed as slurry again and needs its 16-week storage. So who needs soil samples for 2023 going forward? From now on, it is compulsory for holdings with a grassland stocking rate in 2022 of over 130 kgs of nitrogen per hectare to take soil samples. All arable land must be soil sampled as well in 2023. Soil samples that have been taken since mid-September 2019 are valid for 2023, but soil samples taken from mid-September 19 to mid-September 2020 are not valid for 2024. So you might have soils that are valid for 2023, but you might need to take them at the back of 2023 to make sure that you have valid soil samples for 2024. So nitrogen allowances for grassland stocking rates has also changed. There's been an overall reduction of 10% to the maximum chemical nitrogen rates that can be applied for grassland. And there is going to be another possible 5% reduction in 2024. So you can see here in this table, for farmers that are stocked under 130 kgs of organic nitrogen, they're allowed 114 kgs of nitrogen per hectare. And if you work that out in just say bags of nitrogen per acre, it works out at about 3.4 bags of nitrogen per acre. So it's not a huge allowance. Also then for phosphorus allowance based on your grassland stocking rate here, before you now have farmers who were under 85, 86 to 130 and 131 to 70. At index 4, you aren't allowed any chemical phosphorus, and at index 3, your rates are quite low at 7 10 and 13 kgs per hectare. Now, at a rate for a farmer who's under 85, who wants to spread a bit of 18612 with soil samples that show his index 3, he's only allowed 7 kgs of phosphorus per hectare. That's very low. And if you work that out again into bags per acre of 18612, that works out at just under 1 bag of 18612 per acre. So even if he spread that very low amount, he has just about breached his allocation of phosphorus. Also, when you're working out the phosphorus allocation for a farm, you must deduct the phosphorus in the form of concentrates and organic manures imported as well. So this is just a table here that shows all the spreading dates in a nice, neat, handy table. In Waterford, Kilkenny, we're very lucky to be in Zone A with a 16-week storage period. For chemical fertiliser, the prohibitive dates are from the 15th of September to the 26th. So that means that you have to stop on the 15th. Sorry, you have to stop on the 14th. That's the last day. And on the 15th, you can't spread. The same, the 26th is the last day you can't spread. You can start on the 27th. So organic fertiliser, spreading them, we've lost 2 weeks here as well. We're 1st of October now to the 12th of January. And for farmyard manure, those dates remain the same from the 1st of November to the 12th of January. So there's also new rules in to do with the low emission slurry spreading. A phased approach has been introduced for mandatory use of low emission slurry spreading for certain stocking rates above 100 kgs of nitrogen per hectare. You can see down here in the bottom of this little table here, from January 2023, anyone who's over 150 kgs of N per hectare must use low emission. From January 24, it's going to be 130 kgs. And from January 25, it's for anyone who's over 100 kgs. So slowly but surely, a large amount of farmers are going to be brought into this option. Low emission slurry spreading equipment must also be used to spread all applications of pig slurry from 2023. And it also must be used to apply livestock manure to arable lands, or else the livestock manure must be incorporated into the soils within 24 hours. So another issue that's affecting all farmers is the importing, exporting of slurry. So all slurry movements are online. The online system is mandatory use from now on. So if I wanted to export slurry to someone, I would need their herd number. I would have to do it under ag food. I can do it yourself as a farmer, or you can get your agent to do it. And the person who is importing needs to verify it online themselves, or they can get their advisor. So there's 2 steps to it, and both sides, the exporter and the importer, have to be involved in it. Paper applications for slurry movements are no longer accepted. There's also a change in the nutrient value of slurry. Back in January 2022, the nutrient content was 5 kgs of nitrogen. That has dropped to 2.4. So the consequences for that is, if you are exporting slurry to try and lower your stocking rate to a certain figure, you need to export more slurry to hit the desired stocking rate. And there's also more phosphorus imported if you're accepting the slurry. All farmers importing slurry from now on need soil samples. So if you do not take soil samples, you cannot import slurry. Imported slurry, it's the exact same as buying chemical nitrogen and phosphorus. As I mentioned before, lowly stocked farmers, under 85, there's a very low P allowance there. So make sure that you can take in the slurry before you take it in, and always check you can take it in. Another new rule is the fertiliser database for chemical fertiliser. This will be established by the department by the summer 2023. It was supposed to be in January, but there is legislation to come through that's delaying it. It'll be up and running this summer. And so the whole year for 2024, all the fertiliser for 2024 will be on that register. The database includes merchants, traders and users, and farmers will have to register to use the system. It's up to the farmer to check that if they can buy the fertiliser. If you go to your merchant and ask for 18612 or 272.5, the merchant is going to give it to you. He's going to put it down beside your name or your herd number, but it's up to yourself to find out if you can take it in. And I suppose a small bit of good news with all this new legislation coming in, nitrogen usage has dropped 20% in 2022. So this is very positive and has a knock-on effect of improvement in water quality. And it should help people abide by this new legislation coming in. So just a quick word on commonage and peat soils. So there's a restriction on commonage allowance for stocking rate purposes only. Before commonage was treated at the same stocking rate potential as a perennial ryegrass field, which was 170 kgs of nitrogen per hectare. That is now limited to 50 kgs of nitrogen per hectare. So for anyone with commonage, it could actually it could actually raise your stocking rate. So it's good to have a quick look at that and just see where you're falling in the stocking rate. And for peat soils, now they're not very common in Waterford or Kilkenny, but they do appear in pockets. Most people who have them know they have them. But if you do have a peat soil, you need to do a soil test to determine if the organic matter is over 20%. And if you're unsure if you have peat soils or not, you can talk to your advisor and they should be able to tell you. So just to conclude there, the Nitrates Action Programme, it's designed to prevent pollution of surface waters and groundwaters from agricultural sources and to protect and improve water quality. These are all new measures that are trying to break those pathways that Terry mentioned there in the beginning. The direction for the future for all farms is really reduced nitrogen usage, more use of low emission slurry spreading, and more storage for animal manures. So the take-home messages from this presentation was take soil samples, know where you sit in terms of stocking rate, know which regulations apply to your farm. All farms are affected in some ways. There's some legislation there, changes there that are going to affect your farm, and that these changes in legislation are being driven by water quality issues. Thank you. Back to you, Terry.
Great. Thanks very much, Katrina. That was a superb presentation. You kept it, simple there that people could follow. So we appreciate that. So look, right, you're back up there on screen, and Martin, you're there as well.
Yeah.
Look, as I want to remind you again, the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen there is available for you, the farmers or participants, to ask questions. And I remind you of that again, and maybe from Katrina, that'll generate some questions. So look, we have a few questions in. I'm just going to throw on, Martin, before I hand over to you there. Katrina, just the reduction there of the 170 kilo of organic nitrogen per hectare there, I think it was on your second last slide, that's reduced down to 50 for commonage. Does that affect private mountain as well?
No, not at the moment. At the moment, it's only for commonage. Now, there's not much difference between, you could have a commonage on one mountain and private mountain next door. It's the exact same land, but no, at the moment, private mountain is treated at 170.
Okay. And I'll just give one more before I hand to you there, Martin. I see a question coming in here. Can soil water be spread with splash plate?
I'm not sure on that one. I'll come back to you there before the end of the presentation with that, an answer to that one.
Yeah. Okay. Martin, how about you with questions?
So I just have one there, Katrina. So if a person, if they've stocked or under 130 organic in for last year, what way are they in situation to a soil test and applying NEP fertilizer?
So they're stocked under 130. So it's not mandatory for them to take soil samples, but if they want to import slurry, they can't. They are also in a situation where they're at the lower end of the allowances for phosphorus. So if they're assuming, if they're not taking soil samples, you have to assume index 3, that's the lowest rate there of 7. If they did take soil samples and they had index 1 or 2, they would have a higher allowance and be able to import if they wish to.
Yeah, so I mean, it's emphasized on what you said in summary. Really, you need to take soil samples, both to spread any P effectively yourself, and certainly, and it's, later on in the year, this exporting and importing of slurry happens. You cannot import any gallon of slurry whatsoever unless you have soil tests that will allow you to do that. Because they're the two big things Just other thing to remind people again, Katrina, with the low emissions slurry technology are using triple bar, trail and shoe. So it's all based on your stocking rate last year. We probably don't know that definitively for 2022 yet. I think the November figures are up there a week ago. So in due course, you'll know your exact 2022 limits. And definitely from then, you know, you are caught with, it's the 130 is our 150 is our cutoff this year. Isn't that it, Katrina?
Yeah, yeah. You're right, Terry. Yeah, the November figures only went up there shortly. This is all those figures are pulled from the CMMS, and it's a moving figure. It takes about 6 weeks for it to settle. So it's only kind of 6 weeks after the day has passed that you can go back and look at the stocking rate for that day 100%. So I suppose we won't know the stocking rates 100% from the 31st of December really till nearly mid-February, I'd say.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, and you could argue there might be a grey area there, but look, what we're saying to people, and we have a farm walk covering this next Friday week. Look, the low emission slurry spreading is getting you 50% more nitrogen out of that slurry compared to the splash plate. So while it's a regulation that the department are imposing, in all honesty, you're going to be gaining out of it yourself, because where you might have got 5 or 6 units of nitrogen from your 1,000 gallons, you're going to get 9 or 10 units per 1,000 gallons, and we know the price of nitrogen, and if that can be got by using a different method of applying it, that's a huge win-win to you, the farmer. So maybe Martin, have you any final question before maybe we move on to the tillage and we can pick up at the end?
Just one more, Katrina there. How long do soil samples are valid for? How long do they last?
5 years.
5 years. So if we took a sample, say when did it expire for this year? So say if we took a sample 15th September.
I'll put up that. Will I put up that
you
slide
4
again?
years up there, 5 hectares and 4 years.
5 years, 4 hectares. Yeah. Yeah,
the slide there on it, all right.
Yeah, sorry now, just give me 1 second there.
I think we're using the 15th of September there. Obviously, I can remember from your thing is the cutoff. So a soil sample taken, before, January, February, March, that side of the 15th of September counts for the year in question, and a soil sample taken the 20th of September or October, November, that soil sample is counting for the next year. So you can go to your slide there where you had the 4-year rule.
Can you see that slide there now?
Yeah, that's there.
That's there. So samples analysed, yes, and so mid-September 2019, soil samples from then onwards are valid for 2023. And then from mid-September 2019 to 2020 will not be valid for 2024. So if you were using end of 19 or any soil sample dated with a 2020 date in it, you'll need to kind of take them again at the back end of this year to be right for 2024.
Yeah, so what you're saying there is a sample taken, say, after the middle of September 19. So it was taken in October 19. The first year counts as 20. So it's okay for 20, 21, 22, and 23. As you say, it's valid for 23. And then you'll have to go and sample again at the end of 23, I suppose we're saying, for 24.
Yeah, yeah.
And I suppose the thing we're pointing out to farmers is it's a very narrow window you have for soil sample, because there's no point in thinking I'll soil sample in March and the place half covered with slurry. That soil sample is meaningless. So your window there, we've often said, is probably December and the first few weeks of January is your window for getting the soil sampling done to have a valid one. Because I mean, you take a sample after applying fertilizer or particularly fertilizer P or slurry, sure, it's a silly result you're getting. It's meaningless. So Katrina, we might at this stage, and conscious of time there, and we have a big we have a large number of participants on, so we keep moving on. Stay with us, and we may have a few more questions at the end for you, Katrina. So thanks very much for your presentation. Mark, we're going to hand over to the tillage side of the house, and that's your department, so we'll hand to you for your slides.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Can you hear me there okay there?
Yeah, you're just going to present mode and we're fine. Perfect.
All right. Okay, so I'm just going to run through there the changes that have come in 2023 from the tillage point of view. So there's a bit of crossover here, I suppose, with what Katrina has said in relation to some of the changes. First of all, yeah, the soil sampling one, the requirement there for all arable land from 2023 onwards, you must have a valid soil sample to allow phosphorus to be spread on the land. So if you don't have a sample, then you have to assume index 4 for P. So like Katrina was just saying there a minute ago, a valid sample is from a maximum area of 5 hectares and taken after the 15th of September 2019 for the 2023 growing season. So they last for 4 growing seasons effectively. So if that's when your samples were taken, then you're going to need new ones for next year. Basically, that's how it's looking. So look, there's a lot of numbers on this slide, but this is the table from the nitrates directive showing the phosphorus allowance, the maximum fertilizer chemical phosphorus rates for tillage crops. So you can see there in the column on the right hand side, index 4 is mostly zeros all the way down there. Certainly for all the cereals, it's all 0. There is an allowance there for beet, potatoes, and maize, and then back to 0 again for beans and rape. So the vast majority of tillage ground is covered under that there, and index 4 is 0p. So you need to have your sample that shows your land is either at indexes 1, 2, or 3 to be allowed to spread phosphate from this year onwards. So I suppose the next stage then from having taken your soil samples is to go on and do a fertilizer plan. So what requirements are there? What's needed, I suppose? What does your planner need for that? Obviously the soil samples are the first step. That's what it's all based on. So you're 1 per 5 hectares. Then obviously needs to know the crop, or whether it's a crop or grassland, where each sample was taken from. He needs to know if there's any organic manures being applied to the land, to the farm. Also needs to know previous year stocking rates. They're all available online. And then also the previous year's meal purchase will affect the amount of phosphate allowed as well. There's additional N and P allowances for dependent on yield. I don't know if you can see that table at the bottom there. The base requirements that were in the previous table are based on those yields. You can see winter wheat there, 9 tons per hectare, spring barley 6.5. So there's additional P and phosphate and nitrogen allowed on where you can show that you had higher yields than that in the previous 3 years. So that then generates nutrient kind of a profile for your farm. It's the 3 basic ones, I suppose: your pH, your lime requirement, your phosphorus and potassium, your P index and K index, and it'll tell you how your farm is looking then from a nutrient balance point of view. And then from that we can also generate these maps. So we can generate one for lime, P and K. They're color coded, so they're very easy to follow. You can see there the dark green is the high indexes, is the index 4, and the light green up on the left there is index 3, the blue 2, and the pink 1. So you can see quite clearly from that then where if you have some organic manure to spread, for example, that you can target it at the lower indexes, the pink and the blue fields for the organic manure. Okay, another change then that came in last year was the shallow cultivation requirement to generate green cover after the harvest. This came in last year, so it's there again for this year and will be going forward. So basically what the requirement there is that you need to cultivate within 10 days of baling straw post harvest, or within 10 days of chopping straw, but in all circumstances within 14 days of the combine going through the crop, you have to run a cultivator of some sort through the stubble there to generate as much green cover growing as possible. So it's only the lightest run of a disc or a light grubber or something like that. You're not talking about anything more than a couple of inches really. and that requirement will be there for the coming harvest in 2023 and future years. So in some scenarios then where you have maybe a grassweed problem, there's some of the bromes that need light to germinate, so it wouldn't suit them to have a cultivator go through. So a run of like a ring roller is sufficient there to get them germinated and create a stale seed bed for those grasses. So there's like in the bottom point there, like it says, there's 20 to 25% of your cereal land on each holding is to be left uncultivated post-harvest. So there is that amount that you don't do. There are particular birds that seem to prefer the stubble rather than the green cover. So that 20 to 25% is left for them. Then there are some other exemptions there. If you're a certified organic farmer, all root crops and late harvested crops doesn't apply, or any crop indeed harvested after the 15th of September. If you have undersown, obviously you don't want to tear it up again. And then if you're going to sow a winter crop the following autumn, then you don't need to cultivate either. And then finally, if it's land going to be used for the ploughing championships, is exempt as well. So that's kind of covers that one. From a herbicide application then and ploughing, herbicide is not allowed on that 20 to 25% of ground that wasn't cultivated. Herbicide not allowed until 1st of February. So whatever you didn't cultivate last autumn, you can't spray it off until tomorrow, basically. The 1st of February is tomorrow. So that's the requirement there. There's no change though to the ploughing. You could have ploughed it without spraying it off since December the 1st last. And again, I suppose that applies to well, the tillage area of the country. Nitrate zone A is the counties in the south and east, so that covers all that. So slurry spreading then from an arable point of view. So yeah, this was mentioned in the previous one as well. Low emissions LESS should be used to apply all livestock manure to arable land, or if a splash plate is used, it must be incorporated within 24 hours. So if a splash plate is the way you're getting it on, there will be a certain amount spread before spring crops are sown this in the coming months. You need to spread that as close as possible to when the ground is being ploughed. So within 24 hours, it must be incorporated. All pig slurry you must use LESS for pig slurry from this year onwards. No splash plates allowed anymore on that one. And then, like was mentioned previously, you must have a soil sample to be allowed to import slurry. So that's kind of covered from the arable point of view, in that where you have to have a soil sample for all arable land anyway. So that kind of covers that one there. So the closing date for slurry spreading in 2023 is the end of September. The 30th of September is the last day for spreading there. And yeah, so the nutrient contained in slurry from this year, there is a reduction there. So our figure is 2.4 kilos of nitrogen and 0.5 of a kilo of phosphorus. And then the other rates there, and the other pig slurry, sheep slurry, and poultry manure as well, with higher amounts there available to crops. So moving on then to buffer zones. So there's a change here, I suppose, from last year, which was a 2 meter buffer zone was required up until the end of last year. That has changed now to a 3 meter buffer zone for ploughing or cultivating for all crops. You must leave a 3 meter buffer zone from water courses that are identified on the OSI maps. You will get them on a 1/500 scale or less. You can see there on the bottom, there's the two rivers there. There's a solid blue line. They're the ones that this applies to. So if you have a stream or a river or that on your holding or running along the side of your holding, then you need to stay back from the top of the bank. You need to stay back 3 meters with the plow or the cultivator this spring from there on. Also, then if you're going to if you sow cover crops later on in the year, and that crop is going to be grazed in the field with lambs or weanlings or whatever, there's an additional 1 meter then, so it's a 4 meter buffer zone for grazing forage crops in situ. That's the second one. And then the third one, for late harvested crops, the buffer zone is increased to 6 meters. So late harvested crops in this situation is defined as any vegetables, I suppose, being harvested after the 15th September, but the main ones being fodder beet, potatoes and maize. So cereals and beans are excluded from this. So it's only really beet, potatoes and maize here, and the required buffer zone, if you along one of those blue water courses, is 6 meters from this year onwards. So a big change for that, where it would have been 2 meters in the past. So that's it. Thanks to you all for listening. That's my end of it from Tillage. Sorry.
Yeah, great stuff, Mark. So we'll just ask you to come up on screen there, yeah, and Katrina's there as well. So look, yeah, plenty of rules there as well. The tillage farmers have to digest, I suppose, apart from the soils there and phosphorus that Katrina was saying, and obviously the slurry, the extra rules there will be the buffer strips that tillage farmers have to observe. So look, we'll maybe throw it open then to both of you. What about maybe Mark first? What have you some questions in there, Martin?
Yeah, I just wonder, Mark, is there any situation where a P can be applied to cereals when the P is index 4?
Yeah, there is one scenario there. If your pH that comes back in your soil sample is 7 or higher, there's an allowance there of 20 kilos of phosphorus on that ground, so 16 units per acre. But obviously you need the soil sample to show that the pH is high. So if it's if you have a combination of high pH and high P, you are allowed a P application there, because the high pH locks up a significant amount of the P in the soil, so you can get a bit on that way. All right, yeah.
Just one more there in relation to soil samples. Do soil samples have to be taken on arable land where the grassland stocking rate is less than 130 kilos of organic N?
Yeah, that one's come up a bit there. All right, that if you're of a low grassland stocking rate, do you still need a sample on your tillage ground? Yes, you do. Regardless of stocking rate, you must sample all tillage ground this year. Yeah.
And I suppose one final one then, I suppose any additional P allowed depending on yield, and how much extra then depending on yield?
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier there. I suppose, yeah, there is an allowance there above a reference yield of what is it, 9 tons of winter wheat, 6.5 tons of spring barley. So above that, for every additional ton, there's 3.8 kilos of P extra allowed. So there's a nice bit more there. A lot of on higher yielding crops, there's obviously more off takes, so you're allowed to get that bit more back on then the following year.
Perfect.
Okay, great stuff.
I might come in there now just to answer. Sorry, there someone asked before, Mark, there, can soiled water be spread with a splash plate? And the answer to that is yes. All soiled water, whether you're in a derogation or not, can be spread with a splash plate.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Yeah, that's the rule in that, and that's there'll be a closed period there for the month of December in due course for that soiled water. I think you were saying there earlier. It's extended. And
the other thing then as well, just to correct myself there, I said their soil samples were valid for 5 years. That's an old rule. They actually changed that in 2018. Soil samples are now valid for only 4 years. They brought it in regardless of stocking rate, 4 years. Yeah.
And just on the soil test then, just to clarify there, so the upper limit on area for any valid soil sample is 5 hectares, which in old money is 12.5 acres. Obviously, you can put 3 or 4 acres in for a soil sample or whatever. Just to maybe explain that 5 hectare rule, Katrina. If someone goes out there and have a 15 acre, which is a 6 hectare field, what have they to do?
Well, one soil sample won't do it. So I suppose it's up to yourself to divide it as best you can. Maybe there's one side of the field is slightly
Katrina?
better or worse. Divide it up. You could do 2 3s or whatever suits you best. Maybe you have a smaller field next door where you could group them together. It's really up to yourself. But overall, on average, when you're doing your soil samples, you need to have it 1:5 hectares. And if you're putting it into a plan, we have to allocate the exact field to the soil sample. And so whatever fields are allocated cannot go over 5 hectares. Otherwise, it will not pass an inspection.
Yeah, so they're definitely got to be tighter than that there. So I suppose we're saying, you know, a 7 hectare field or a 6 hectare field effectively needs 2 soil samples. And you say, Katrina, you know, whether if the field's identical all over, that doesn't matter. You may still take 2 samples. We'll draw an imaginary line down the middle of that field. So that is the reality. And look, the soil test sample lasts 4 years, and it might be the best few euros you ever spent there. We all know the price of fertilizer, and you know, if you are high in P, don't be buying the P, and if you are low in P, well, you're not getting the same grass or crop that you would if you had, you know, corrected that P. So hugely valuable information for very, very small money. I suppose is what we're saying about the soils, and just to have them right there. Remember, one sample, a max of 5 hectares, you know, or 12 acres, and we're often saying
Generally,
have soil samples 8 to 10 acres.
Generally, if you work out the cost of taking a soil sample, if you were to soil sample every hectare over a 4-year period, I think it works out at about €1.20, €1.30 per hectare. So when you look at it, like, it's actually quite cheap, and you only have to do that once every 4 years. It tells you exactly what is there, and you know exactly what to do, where to put it, where the right place is for everything. So if you look at it over per hectare basis, it's not that expensive really to take soil samples.
Yeah, one unit of nitrogen costs you more than €1. One actual unit of nitrogen. So I mean, it's superb.
No, €1.20 to €1.30 per hectare to take the soil sample.
Yeah, no, I understand, absolutely.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So I'm just saying it's a very, very cheap spend, so well worth doing.
Yeah.
What way are we, Martin? Any final couple of questions for people?
Not at the moment. If anyone, just make sure and use the Q&A there just to get in your questions there, just before we finish up there quickly. If you just want anything at all there, just throw it in.
Yeah.
To show.
So what advice, Mark, then would you give you if tillage farmers were the 1st of February tomorrow? You know, is there a big uptake in soil testing, or is it something that needs to be given a push for farmers at this stage, or what are you seeing on the ground?
No, there has been definitely, there's been a big push on it there the last month or 6 weeks, or from since December really. But there's still plenty of time, I suppose. You know, there more so than grassland maybe where slurry has gone out. Most tillage ground won't get the compound until maybe the end of February. So there is probably the bones of another month really to take soil samples there. That'll be valid for the crop that's going or that is in the ground already, and that's being sown in March. So it's still plenty of time there, and we'd encourage everyone that needs them to get them taken as soon as possible.
And look, we have that soil sampling service here. Ring us up. Pat Chice is doing our soil sampling. He'll be out to you within, I'd say, 2 days of you ringing us up. He's out very fast there. He'll get them done, sent away, and we'll have the results back to you probably in less than a fortnight from when they're taken. So come to us, or if you have somewhere else that does them for you or whatever, absolutely. Once you get them done, that's the important thing. So look, I think there are a couple of questions coming in there, Martin, at the moment. I think just
just two questions.
Yeah, read them out there, Martin.
If your soil sample covered more than 5 hectares in 2020, does it count now? So I suppose if
you can throw that to either Katrina or Mark there.
Yeah.
No, that won't be valid now. No, you'll have to get an extra sample done, or if they're that old, you're probably as well to just fully take a full resample of the area, really. Yeah.
And you have another one, Martin, I think.
And just one more there then. What is the NNP produced by you? Or if anyone says that.
So for a lowland yo, it's 13. For an upland, it's 13 kgs of nitrogen. For upland yo, it's 9. And the phosphorus figures are, give me 1 second there. Phosphorus figures for a lowland yo is 2, and phosphorus figures for an upland yo is 1.
Okay, very good. Yeah. Then obviously, then if you have hoggets or store lambs, you're all relatively lower still. I think the lowland hogget is something like 6 in nitrogen, is it?
Yeah, lowland hogget is 6, mountain hogget is 4. They're 1 again for the phosphorus as well.
Okay. So again, a good question insofar as when you are looking at your stocking rate for 2022, which determines whether you must use less technology in 23 or whether you need soil samples because you're over 130. That's the thing that won't show up on the ag food tab for you or for us when we're looking at like in February there to see what your overall organic stocking rate was for 2022. The sheep don't show up there, so you know we have to add on the sheep numbers, which is based on your previous census. So it's a good question, and sheep have to come, and equally horses have to be added on there manually. So you might look good on the computer on the ag food tab, but remember if you have sheep, they're not included there on that table. So look, I think there's one more question maybe to come in, Martin, and we might wrap it up with that there if it's a good question.
Just there, can I see areas on my farm where NNP are successful as such as pip maps? Don't know.
Will I take that one?
Yeah, work away, Katrina.
Yeah, so there's a website called
You're breaking up a little bit there,
Catchments.ie.
Katrina. Just try that
It's
again.
not the easiest.
Just say that
Can
again,
you-
Katrina. I think we broke up there.
The website catchments.ie. Can you hear me?
Catchments.ie, yeah.
Catchments.ie is a website where you can bring up your farm and you can click on and off buttons. It's not the easiest website in the world to work, but the information is all there. It's just to know kind of which to turn on and turn off.
Great stuff. Okay, look, I think at this stage, we might wrap it up. We were going on a little bit further than we expected, but look, it was brilliant to see a good crowd there tuned into that. So as I say, there's lots of figures and facts and rules and regulations there. Not to worry, we are going to send that out to yourselves that are on with us this afternoon and people that weren't available to view the webinar. We're going to send that out on a link next week that you just click on your phone and you'll be able to see the whole recording, and equally it'll be up on the Chagas Kilkenny Waterford YouTube page. So look, at this stage, and I'll draw the webinar to a close just to thank our speakers, Katrina Foley from Dungarvan, Mark Trimble from the Kilkenny office here with me, and Martin Ryan there, my colleague, Drystock advisor here in Kilkenny. So thanks to everyone. Anything you're unsure about, ring up any of us there. We're seeing this a lot of times, and it's still, you know, it takes a bit, you know, you have to really concentrate to keep your head around the rules for yourselves that might be seeing it for the first time. It's not easy to digest all of it. You may well want to play back the webinar or pick up the phone and give us a shout. So at that, I wish everyone well, and thanks very much for joining us. Thank you. Bye.